Good morning. This is day 10, Dataverse creating, adding tables to Dataverse, creating relations in Dataverse tables, and also leveraging those newly created table as part of Power Apps. When you see the typical architecture of Dataverse can be called from any of the elements of Power Platform. This is Power Apps, this is Power Automate, and this is AI Builder inside Power Platform. And the last one is Power BI. We have one more thing called Power Virtual Agent. User can make a call to Dataverse environment from any one of these platforms which are part of Power Platform. Once they make a call, the call will be first delegated into load balancer. What is a load balancer? A load balancer is a software or a layer which takes all the user calls. Once it get a call, it first looks at all the web servers which are associated on the load balancer. When the load balancer identify web server 1 is having some bandwidth, load balancer will route the user request onto that web server, and then web server will decide what call it is. Is it a sandbox call, or is it a reporting service call, or is it a job which has to be done by this particular user request? It will decide. However, when it goes to the particular server or particular web front end, what happens is it uses the database behind the scene. If you see here in Dataverse, typically the data is in turn storing in SQL server. However, this has more than SQL. What are those? It also has SQL Elastic Pools, which gives the eligibility to extend the database size as and when user reach the allocated data size, and it can move further as and when user want to add more data on that. And the next one is blob, which is where it stores all the files or images. And next one is cosmos db. Cosmos db is gonna help to index the data to provide search result. Cosmos db will have all the indexed pointers, and it supports search. Last but not least, which is called data lake storage, where it will store user data into that. This is the typical structure and the flow of each and every user request. When you see the various pillars of Power Platform Dataverse, it has clients, data, integration, environment lifecycle, security compliance, business rules and workflows, reporting, last but not least, app lifecycle. What is client means? In Power Platform Dataverse, it supports various clients, which is web, mobile, desktop, Outlook, Excel, and Teams, which eventually means I can leverage my tables inside the Dataverse onto a web client, or I can use onto a mobile clients, which is Power Apps or Power Automate. I can run a flow from Power Automate on from mobile also, desktop or Outlook also. I can refer the Dataverse tables. And the next one is data. It shows that maximum size of the data as 4 terabytes or more than that. It also supports various data types as relational data, file, image, find, filter, sort, and various other functions I can perform on top of this Dataverse fields. It also supports basic and advanced data types as part of the column field, and it also supports custom tables. Mobile offline also I can use the tables within this Dataverse. And the next one is integration. It seamlessly integrate with Power Apps, Power Automate, Logic Apps, Power BI, all the elements which are there on top of Power Platform. Okay. Environment lifecycle. If you look at the environment lifecycle, it supports any number of environments. I can create as many number of environments, depends on the storage availability I have at the platform level, and it can support up to 4 terabyte or more for each and every environment. It supports resetting, copy and backup as well. And the next one is security and compliance. In IT, we take security and compliance as a highest measure. Having said that, Dataverse gives security to the data in that seamlessly. It encrypts the data so that when you use the app across the network, all the data will be encrypted so that it will be secured. We all know a plain text will always be easily be hackable, but here you can securely send the data because it is encrypted. And the next one is sharing. It supports sharing at various levels. I can give a owner or a contributor or only view permission I can give. It also support auditing and active logging, activity logging also something I can enable on top of this tables in the Dataverse. Business rules and workflows. Business rules means that I can define a business rule to enable and disable the fields inside the table, and also I can I can create my own business rules to ensure that the data is allowed to submit, or I can also restrict the user to submit the data depends on my business rules. Classic workflows are something to define the flow of the sequence flow is something I can define stage 1, stage 2, stage 4, stage 5. How I can define that is what something I can define as part of classic workflows. Power automate is where we can define the actual flows to send the notifications to user, also to add approvals on top of any data which we are submitting as part of the table. Now, next one is reporting. Paginated reports, which is SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services. The same thing we can define on top of Dataverse tables. Power BI dashboards. Power BI is completely a new element which we will learn down the line in the next classes, wherein we can learn what is a data source, what is a report, what is a workspace, how to share a report with other users, other managers in the organization. We will learn that. Next one is managed data lake. Managed data lake is much beyond the Power Platform, but it supports as part of Power Platform also. Dataverse seamlessly be able to sit in managed data lake, which we have discussed in the previous slide. The next, last but not least, is app lifecycle. When we are creating apps with the backend as a backend data source as a Dataverse, it absolutely support application lifecycle. What is application lifecycle is I have created an app in dev environment. Now I want to move the app from development environment to user acceptance testing, which is UAT, and then I want to move it on to production, which is called application lifecycle. First, developer implements in the developer environment, and then it moves on to user acceptance testing environment, UAT environment. User will test it out there. Once we get the user acceptance, then we will push it on to prod. But imagine when we want to push each and every element one by one, which is absolutely a miserable task, especially while we are creating an app with multiple tables and multiple apps, multiple flows in that, which is where we use a concept called solutions in Power Platform. Solutions are two types, unmanaged and managed. Both solutions I can use as part of application lifecycle. If somebody is interested to learn about what is solution, how to create a solution, I have created a video on solutions, which is there as part of our channel description. As part of description, you can see the link for that video. Next one is Azure DevOps Power Platform tools outside our syllabus of Power Platform, but the point is Dataverse supports that also. Last but not least in this slide, self-service CI/CD via GitHub. When we want to implement application lifecycle, we have to configure GitHub, which is where ALM works, application lifecycle management works seamlessly as per the configuration advised by Microsoft. Is it GitHub mandatory, Krishna? Not only GitHub, I can even use Azure DevOps to proceed on the application lifecycle. I logged on to the Power Platform with my account. And if you notice, the first thing we are going to discuss today is What is an environment in Power Platform? How many environments a user or admin can create? Remember, in order to create an environment, one should have admin permissions. Once they have admin permissions, they have to navigate onto admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. This is where user can see all the environments users are navigating at Power Platform level. There are two environments we have. One is a default environment, another one is developer environment. What is default environment is when you spin a Power Platform, you will get one environment by default for every tenant, which is called a default environment for that Power Platform. In Office 365, the terminology is tenant environment. This is how you will see the vocabulary. Having said that, tenant is the parent. Under tenant, you will have various environments and various platforms. One of the platform is Power Platform. The other platforms I could say SharePoint and CRM, Azure. These are all various platforms where we could see on top of on top of a registered tenant inside Office 365 cloud technology. Now, if user want to create a new environment, how they could do is they can click on to new. When you click on that new environment, it will show you various environments which user can create in this platform. First one is sandbox, which usually in IT world, usually we create to play around the apps. That is where we will create the apps and also various features which they want to implement. The next one is a trial. Trial is with subscription and without subscription. Subscription means in Office 365, we can create a subscription to bill against that account. When you create a subscription, it will ask you a credit card or a debit card details to charge on depending on the user usage. This is called that. And the next one is a production environment, which is a typical production environment where we will submit or migrate all the apps on. Last but not least, a trial environment without subscription. This is as similar as this, but here this trial environment life is only 30 days. However, sandbox can be there as long as user is using or admin is permitted. Apart from these, there are two more environments. One is the default environment. Another one is developer environment. What is this developer environment is user can spin their own environment with additional privileges. What do you mean by additional privileges? In Power Platform, there is something called connectors. Each and every connector is to communicate with the data source. Depends on the data source we are using, the type of the connector will be defined. Example, in Power Platform, we can communicate with SharePoint as a data source, which is absolutely a free connector. We don't have to pay anything. However, when we want to communicate with Dataverse, it is not a free connector. Connector is a premium connector. We have to pay for that. We will see how to create a connector, how to configure a connector in a while. So that is the reason we wanted to have a environment where I can practice or I can implement what I want to implement, which is what is developer environment. A developer environment can be created with the help of community subscription. When you create the environment, what happens is user can create apps with premium and standard connectors. They can do whatever they want to do. However, the restriction is when you create a developer environment with community subscription, you cannot share the app with your colleague. It has to be with you only. You cannot share with your colleague or with your manager or with your end user to validate the functionality. So just keep that in your mind when you are using developer environment. So these are all the various environments we have in Power Platform. Creating developer environment with community subscription. Go on to new tab, navigate to powerapps.microsoft.com en-us developer plan. Hit enter. It will take you to the Microsoft page where I can enable developer plan with community subscription. Click on get started here. I have to provide my email account with which I want to create the developer subscription. Okay, remember, I can create any number of developer plans in a platform, but I can create only one developer plan for one email account. Example, I have 20 users in my tenant. I can create 20 developer environments with each and every user. Okay, now I'll go ahead and provide my email account. Once you provide your email account, click on sign up. It will ask you for your authentication. Click on sign in. Once you sign in, it will provide you the disclaimer to start the developer environment with community subscription. If you are interested to share your information to the partners of Microsoft, you can click on checkbox. I'm not interested, so I will click on start directly. Once you click on start, what happens is Power Platform will create a developer environment with community subscription for the given email account. There you go, it is done, and it is asking for country selection. Click on accept. Once you are done, it will spin a developer account for your provided email. Here you go. It clearly shows that this is a developer environment and not meant for production use. Creating new connectors in Power Platform. Log on to Maker Portal, switch to the desired environment where you want to configure the connectors. Now I am in default environment. Go to data, click on connections. Under connections, if there are any connections already established in Power Platform, you can see here. If you want to create a brand new connection, click on create connection. Here you can search for whichever the connector you want to configure. When I want to say SharePoint, I can just click on plus. It will ask you the type of authentication. I say cloud services. I'll say create. It will ask you for your email account. Select your respective email account, and that's it. It will create the connection. It is that straightforward. Even for Dataverse also, go to connectors, search for Dataverse. It will show you two type of connections in Dataverse. One is a legacy and the other one is Dataverse. What is the difference between these two are both works for Dataverse. There is no difference, but only difference is when you look at the Dataverse, this one, it has throttling limit is high. The number of API calls it can handle are 6,000. The legacy can handle only 1,000 calls. I have added the reference for both the connectors as part of the description. When you create a connection with one user, Power Platform will use that connector in all the pillars of Power Platform, meaning Power Apps, I can use the same connector. Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agent also, I can use the same connector within that environment. If you switch the environment, it will not show that connector, which means that connectors are at environment level, not at the Power Platform level. Click on tables. As in this environment, we already have few tables by default. These are all the tables we get by default, wherein one of the table I wanted to cover here is users table. If you see here users table, in users table, we have data related to all the users who are all part of this tenant and Azure. When I click on data, it clearly shows you all the data, but these are all the default information and followed by two other accounts. One is my name and the other one is Power Apps Checker application. These are all the accounts we have as part of this tenant. Okay. Now, if I click on tables, if I don't want to see all the standard tables which get created as and when we spin environment, you can always go here and just say custom. This one will show you all the custom tables. So now I'm going to create a new table. To create a new table, click on new table. This will give you an option to provide a display name and plural display name followed by the environment prefix and then name which you wanted to give. So few things will automatically populate. See that as in when I provide a display name, it populates plural display name and also name over here. See, say student information. The time I say student information, it immediately populated plural name with the additional character as S next end of it. And also it created one more name here, which is the internal name get create and to refer this table across the platform. If you want to refer this table in Power Automate, Power BI or Power Apps, that is the name you will see. This is the name you will see while you are referring to columns inside that. And now I wanted to say student first name as a mandatory, or I will say this is the column which get creates as the primary key. So I'll say student ID. So I want the student ID to be primary name and it gets create as a primary key. So once it is done, the next fields are what is the description? This is to store the student information, and the table type is what is the table type is it a standard table type or activity table. I am not going to create an activity table, it's standard table. Say create table. So it will create a table. Wait for a minute. Apart from the student ID primary name on the primary column, it will also create so many other dependent columns. You see that these are all the dependent columns which automatically get created. If you notice here, few of them are created by created delegate, created on which date it is created on. What are all those is this is called a metadata. Metadata means that data about data. A typical example is Krishna went to India. This is the information. Information about the information is when did Krishna started, which city Krishna took the first flight, and where is the connecting flight, where is he landing in India. After he land in India, what is the transport type he took to travel to his hometown, how many hours is the travel time, how many hours it took from the India airport to his hometown. This is all the additional information about the information. The primary information is Krishna traveling to India, but the additional information is giving more details about the primary information. That additional information is called metadata. These columns are called metadata for the primary information. However, if you notice here, all the types of that column are standard and custom. The custom is the one which I have created. Standard are the ones which get created automatically as and when we create a table. If you notice here, we have something called lookup, date time, whole number, again owner. These are all the various data types it supports and it got created even. I can create a lookup. Lookup in a Dataverse means that I am getting the data related to this data from another table. That is called lookup, which means that in a typical database terminology, when you create a primary key and foreign key constraint, a foreign key is looking into another table. Table 1, I have column 1 as a primary key, column 2 as a foreign key, means that the information whatever I am storing as part of column 2 is referring to another table where it is already existed. It is referring to that table, right? So here also lookup means that the data is not typically user is submitting here. User is selecting the data which is already part of another table. Come to relationship, and if you notice here, modify by is looking into a table called a related table called user. We already noticed what is user. User table is the one which stores all the users who are part of Active Directory for this tenant. If I want to see only my own columns, I can come here and say custom. It shows only my own columns. Let's move forward and create all the required columns for this student information table. Now I'm going to create first name with the data type as text. how I can define the data type is when you click on here, these are all the various data types I can associate with my field name. What are those are text, which is single line of text or a text field which supports up to one area. The next one is text area, which is more text where I can give example, address or description details or any text which I am anticipating with a large data. Email, URL, phone number, auto number, which is to generate the number automatically, and choice, which is to provide the choice values, date and time, and date only. When you want to create a application where you require date and time, example, appointments. When you're creating an application for a hospital, in that you will have to add a field part of the form to submit or to choose the appointment. That time we will have to say date and time also. That time we will choose this. And when you want to use only date, you can use this. And next one is decimal numbers, file type, which means when I wanted to attach any files on this record, I can just say file, and image, yes or no, multi-line text, which is exactly same as text area. Okay. Now, in this scenario, I want to create field with the name, first name, and the type as text. Here, I can specify which is a mandatory field or option field. I'm going to make it as a required field. What is recommended is ideally user is advising you to fill in. If you don't fill also, it will not enforce you to fill, but ideally it is a recommended field. Okay, it is as good as optional field. Okay, say done. It got added. And if you notice, as and when we do that, I see two more uh, buttons here. One is to save the table and the other one is to discard. The time I say discard, all the new columns, whatever we added as part of table will be discarded. It will only save the table with the primary name column, which is student ID. Ensure that you clicked on save table once you are done with adding all the required columns. Let me go ahead and add the rest of the columns. If you notice here, gender, I'm going to create it as a choice. And if I click on the time I select the data type as choice, it also gives one more option to select existing choice fields. Okay. But I'm not happy with any of this because I want to create a choice with the values as male, female, correct? Now I don't see anything. So go ahead and click on new choice. The time you click on new choice, it will give you an option to create a choice list. Remember, it is again giving you an option to create choice list. So I'm going to say, because this is something we need to use while we are adding, while we are referring these choices in the app. So always give a proper name into this for this choice list. Say, okay. The time I say save, it will create a choice list which sits on under table, and it also get assigned to this field. Okay. And again, I can say any value as a default value, but I'm not going to see any as default value. Whether it is a required, yes, definitely it is a required field. And I'll say, if you notice here, there is one more thing called searchable. If you do not click this as yes for searchable, you cannot search the data with this field, which means it will not index the data for this field. Say done. I have created address as multi-lines of text, age as a whole number, and class as choice, and again gender as choice, first name, last name as a single line of text, and phone number as whole number. Once I'm done with that, I'll click on save tables. Now the table is finalized. Limitation with the field types is once you create a field with a specific data type, there is no way you can change the data type. If you have to change that, unfortunately, you will have to delete that field and create another field. Now we have created a table with wherein it stores student information. Now I want to create another table which is to store student attendance. Okay. Why I wanted to create another table is for attendance is I want to create a relation between this table to that table wherein my student ID should refer to this table. If you notice here, I have created a table called student ID that I want to point onto that table. I repeat, in this, I have created three columns, custom columns. First one is attendance note to store the attendance notes. If user had any attendance notes they wanted to submit, okay, and I don't want this as a mandatory, it can be as optional because they can submit attendance notes, or they don't need attendance notes. And the class name is to define which class it is, whatever, which is a artificial intelligence class, or the RDBMS class, or whatever the class name it is. And this is the attendance date, and here we have created a student ID with a lookup. In this lookup we have selected the data type as lookup and the table name as student information table, because all my students are in that table. And so what I have selected student information as my table. I'm done with my table, so I can click on save table. How we can see how the relation is get established in this table is, once the table is, as and when the column is created, it shows the relation under relationships tab. When you go to relationship, you will see a column called student ID. When you click on that, it clearly shows how my relation is established. In this, it shows that this table, which is student attendance table, is associated with the parent table, which is student information table, as many to one. I can always create many to many, one to one, or one to many. Okay, that is the database structure. Unfortunately, in Dataverse, all we could do is many to one or many to many relation is what we could establish. Okay, this is what it is all about: creating tables and creating relations between tables. In so far, what we did, we created two custom tables and we have established a relation between table 1 to table 2. Now that we got our data tables ready, let's go ahead and create an app using these tables. We know we can create app in two ways. First approach is I can create an app from the data, or I can create an app and associate my data table. Correct? Let's go ahead and create with from data. As and when I selected this option, I got connected with my Dataverse by default. If it is not connected, it will ask you to create a connection first. As I said, Dataverse is a premium connector. So all the premium connectors will be associated with this icon, which is diamond icon, which shows that the connector is a premium connector, not a standard connector. And if you come here and search here as student, it shows you both the tables. First thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit some information for student. I'm going to say student information. Remember, you can only select one table. You cannot select more than one table. So select the table, create connect. The time you say this, it will create an app in mobile layout default. We know that we have learned in the previous classes, correct? When you create a table, when you create an app from data, it by default selects the layout as mobile layout. It doesn't select the layout as a tablet layout, correct? Now app got created. We know once app get created from data, it will create three screens by default. One is browse, detail, and edit, correct? And when you go to data as part of the left rail, click on the data. It shows you clearly what are all the tables associated with this app. As of now, we have only student information table associated. So what it is showing here. Now, what I also want to add my attendance table, correct? Now you click on add and you can say by default, it shows you all the table if you have access on that table. Okay, if the list is long, you can always search over there, say like attendance, say there you go, select that. It will add that table also into this. This is how I can add any number of tables as part of my app. In SharePoint also same. When you are creating app with SharePoint as a backend data source. Can I add more than one list as part of my app? Absolutely, you can add. You can add any number of lists as part of your app seamlessly. You go to home. Now I have this, select this, edit the fields. I can add my additional fields. It added only the primary column and the created on. So now I'm going to say add fields. It shows you all the other fields which are part of my table. Now I'm going to say add address, age, class. I'm just selecting all the other fields which I want as part of my screen to submit my data. Okay. Now I have added all the fields, but if you notice here, first one is a student ID followed by address age, but I don't want that. I want first name and last name to be right after student ID. How I can do that is I just hold this, click on the left button on your mouse and just drag it up, hold and drag wherever you want. It automatically rearrange the columns here. And if you notice, created on is something I'm not interested. I don't want as part of the screen. So click on the ellipsis icon, click on remove. It automatically go out of my farm. Okay. And again, address should be the last fellow and gender should be the next, age and address should be the last. Okay. Clear? Now I'm good with that. Say play app. I'm going to say student ID, ID hyphen. Okay, that is, I have given all my details. If you notice here, I can select more than one class. How I can fix that issue, I'll show you now. Click on tick, it will store the data into my database and automatically it shows here. Correct? Now you go back to your tables, and go to student information. Under data, I can see my information here. Why it is showing two columns? Because this is the default view. When I go here and say all columns or custom columns, I want my custom columns only I'm interested in. This is the information. If you notice here, there is a default ID here, which we call it as a unique ID. For each and every record, it will Dataverse will create a unique ID, which is very important. When you want to filter onto a particular ID, that is the key field. Okay. Now I know my data is getting submitted successfully. Let's go ahead and fix that issue where I'm able to select more than one class. Correct? Say here, if you notice here, this one is a combo box, right? Under combo box, go to advanced property, say multi. If you notice here, multi select is true. Multi select is by default true. Unlock this field and you say this as false. The time I say false, it will not let me select more than one class. Somebody asked me how I can do that, sir. This is the property you need to enable. I think Arvind, you're the one who asked me. Now I have submitted one record as part of my student information. What is my next step? I need to submit my attendance. Go ahead and add a new screen, new blank screen, or let me add it as a scrolling screen and say, and here I don't want this. I'll add a form here, edit form to change my form mode, default mode to new. I will provide my data source for this as attendance. Remember, providing attendance. Okay. It will also add the default view. Now I need to add all my other columns like the way how we have added for student information, class name, date, and student ID. Now I want to make student ID as the first one, and if there are any attendance notes, it will say attendance notes class name followed by date. Student ID by default coming as a drop down. Under the drop down, I am able to see all my student IDs there because the student ID is a lookup column to student information. This is something we wanted to see here. I want to I want you to notice that I have not submitted anything as part of attendance, but even then I see the student ID as part of this form because that column is lookup to a parent column called student information. Got it? So what we did under this, I have added a floppy icon to save the data. Under that, I said submit form. On the form, on success, what I did, I'm saying reset form of this form, and on failure, I'm notifying the user as submission fail if there are any failures. Okay, so now we are able to add the information, say like whatever the information, select the user, say remote class followed by class name as say Power Apps Dataverse, and the date is today's date. Submit the data. The data got submitted, so what, it got refreshed, and when I go back in backend and refresh data, I can see the data clearly. This is how I can create an app with Dataverse as my backend database. What is the difference with Dataverse and other data sources is the performance when you create the app with Dataverse is huge, and also I can create the tables with nth degree normalization. We know we can divide the data into normal forms from normal form 1 to normal form 5 to ensure that there is no duplication in the data. If you create the database as a Dataverse, I can create the data fully normalized without any duplication. But if you create the data source as SharePoint as a backend data source, unfortunately, you cannot create that level of normalization on the SharePoint list because SharePoint is not a fully relational database. Okay, that is how we can create the apps and we can submit the data back to database easily. I hope you liked and enjoyed watching this video. By end of this video, you learn what is Dataverse, how to create Dataverse tables, how to create lookup in Dataverse tables, how to spin a new app in Power Apps with the new tables, also how to host a developer environment with community subscription. If you like the video, hit like, add your comments, subscribe to my YouTube channel for all future notifications. Have a nice day.